Okay, I have to be honest with you all. The second night is always the scariest night for me because I'm scared nobody's going to come back after the first week. So I am thrilled to see all of you all here, and I see a lot of new faces this week too. So thank you all so much for coming. Okay, as any teacher would like to ask, did y'all do your homework? Yes. Yay! Did you like it? Did you learn anything new? Oh, good. Then I can go home. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so here's what we're doing tonight. Actually, we're going to pick up right where your homework left off. So if you did not get a chance to do your homework, I hope and pray that you will get a chance to go back and do that. So you know that we looked at Abraham and the covenant that God cut with him on Monday, I believe, or whatever day that you did it on, the first night. And then we went from there to a little bit of background with Joseph, right? God works all things for good, all things. Right? Did that encourage anybody? And let's see, what was the third day? Remembering, right? Oh, that's funny. I almost forgot that it was the lesson on remembrance. That's funny. And after that, we looked at the plagues. And so we went through all the plagues. Did you all learn anything that you didn't know before about the plagues? I did too. I actually had really fun writing those. Okay, so we worked all the way up into the very last plague. And do you remember what that one was? It was the toughest one to read about. It was the plague on the firstborn. That's where we're going to pick up tonight. And if you want to join me, we're going to be in Exodus 12. And I'm just going to read a little bit just to catch us up to speed so we can dive right in tonight. And I'm in Exodus 12, starting in verse 29. I love the sound of all y'all's Bibles. That sounds so good. I love it. Exodus 12, verse 29. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner, who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Do you hear it? Death is no respecter of persons or position. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. As I was writing it and I was thinking about it this week, I have no words to even try to describe this. I don't think we will ever be able to comprehend the horrors of that night. I can't even imagine being able to hear everybody screaming when they got up in the middle of the night and realized that every single household had somebody that had died in it. Verse 31. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go. And also, bless me." And you read a lot in your homework this week how Pharaoh's heart was hardened. And it sounds like Pharaoh has moved from a hardened heart to a broken heart. And he was ready for the Israelites to go. This was the beginning of the Israelites' journey from their slavery to freedom. And it started with the blood of the Passover lamb. Don't ever forget it. We're going to be talking about the Passover in a couple of weeks. We're going to do that together in a session. But don't forget that that's how their journey started into freedom. It was not free. It was not free. Okay, jump down to chapter 13. Verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter. Have you all discovered the maps in the back of your book yet? Flip back there real quick. It's on the very last page in your workbook. And just for fun, look over, I believe it's on the left-hand side, Ramesses, if I'm saying that correctly. This is where the Israelites started out. This is where they were in Egypt. Now, if you look directly over and then up a little bit, you'll see Canaan. This is the land that God had promised Abraham, and that's where they were headed. Okay, do you see where the arrow goes, though? Okay, so it's kind of an understatement that God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was shorter, right? We got that. God did not lead them on the road that was shorter. Okay, so as I read that this week and I started thinking through it, honest to goodness, y'all, I could not think of one single time when God has ever led me down the road that I thought was best. Y'all either? Not one time. And I tried to think of it. There's been so many things where I thought, okay, this has got to be God's will for me. It looks good. This is the road I want to be on. No, not one time. Not one single time. In fact, every time that I could remember that I said, I am never going to do that. I'm never going to be a counselor. Here's my favorite. I am never going to teach. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm never going to live in Indiana. That was one of the things I grew up saying. I'm sorry, but it's true. There is a list of I am never. Okay, every single time that's what I'm doing. So I'm trying something new. Here's what I'm doing now. Lord, I am never going to serve you in the Caribbean. Never. We'll see what happens with that, but I'm giving it a shot. I just want you all to know. So here's what happens. So many times when the road that I thought looked best, the road that I thought was shorter and just made sense to me, was not the road that God took me on. In fact, the road that He took me on was oftentimes a road that led straight to the desert. I know He does the same thing with all of us. And here's one of our biggest temptations when we are smack in the middle of the desert, is we start looking for the quickest exit route, the easiest way out. Girls, listen, deserts require perseverance. You can write that one down if you want to. But you can remember that one for sure, because every time that you're in the desert, we will be tempted to look for the easiest way out, because that's human nature. It's what we do. But if God's got us in a desert, it is for a purpose, and it's because He wants to develop character in us. The ultimate purpose is that we're going to come out of it looking more like Jesus. We want to look more like His Son. So our deserts require perseverance. Okay, let me keep reading. Where was I? 17. For God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. Look, God knows what He's doing. He's taken us where He wants us to go for a purpose. So God led the people around by the desert road toward the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt armed for battle. Now, I don't want to camp here long, but I would never forgive myself if I did not stay here just for a minute. Okay, this is so cool. The Israelites came up out of Egypt armed for battle. Don't forget, they had been slaves their entire life. They knew nothing else. And yet now we read that they came out of their slavery armed for battle. This wasn't their battle gear. We read earlier that God told the Israelites to plunder the Egyptians when they left, meaning ask them for articles of clothing and jewelry, things like that. And armor was part of it. Now, can you imagine about 1 million Israelites carrying around armor? They wouldn't have had a clue what to do with it. Girls, when you become a Christian, God sends you out armed for battle. Half of our problem is that we don't know what to do with it. We get our tails kicked in the desert because we're standing in the middle of the battlefield, and the enemy is coming at us from every direction that you can ever imagine, especially if you're a new Christian, but it happens to all of us. And we get our tails kicked because we don't even know how to put on our armor and how to fight. Ladies, we got to learn how to just fight. It's not the lesson for me to teach you how to fight, but just, keep that in mind. If you have not read Ephesians 6, now would be a really good time to go back and read it. But girls, we have got battle gear. We just need to learn how to put it on, and we need to learn how to use it. Okay, jump on down to verse 21. I'm still in chapter 13. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. Now, can you all even imagine? I really want to call for a Pam moment right at this time. Can you imagine over a million of you, and then right there in front of you all the time, you can see either a pillar of cloud or, ooh, how cool is this? A pillar of fire that's guiding you wherever you go. Ain't that something? That's pretty doggone cool. They could see it all the time. They knew where they were going. They were following him. Let's see, what is God's word like? Oh, it's a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. One of the lies that the enemy wants us to buy into is that when we're in the desert, that we can't hear God, that He's not actually speaking. Okay, Just because we can't feel him speak does not mean that he is not speaking to us. Here's something I want you all to grasp so bad. Just because we can't feel it doesn't mean it's not true. God's truth trumps our feelings every time. Every time. God's word is true. He's speaking. Are we listening? Okay. Let's start in chapter 14. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and encamp near Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. They are to encamp by the sea directly opposite Baal-zephon. Pharaoh will think the Israelites are wandering around the desert in confusion, hemmed in by the desert, and I will harden Pharaoh's heart." There's a theme that you all probably recognize by now. "I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them. But I will gain glory for myself through Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord." So the Israelites did this. Okay, this is so much fun, you all. This, if we're paying attention, here's what we're going to figure out. This is a divine setup. God knew all along how this thing was going to play out. The Israelites did not have a clue. Here's what I want you all to get from this. The enemy is on a leash. God's got the enemy on a leash, and he can't go any further than how far God will allow him to go. Make sense? In this situation, God was going to allow the enemy to get pretty doggone close to the Israelites. It was for a purpose. Did you catch it? Did you catch what the purpose was? It was because God was going to gain glory for himself. Ladies, we got to take this to heart. Listen, the enemy is going to come at us during our Christian walk at some point. I promise you, it's all through here. He will get only so close. But it's for a purpose, and God's going to gain glory from it. So as I was mulling over this week and just thinking about this, like, Lord, what does this look like? Okay, this is the best I could come up with, so y'all are going to have to work with me on it. I am a huge college basketball fan. Huge, like crazy. I am not just any college basketball fan. I am a Kentucky Wildcat basketball fan. Go Cats. I know those were cheers I just heard. Okay, thanks. Love me some Cats. Okay, so here's how it works. Usually in the beginning of the season, yeah, I'm a really big college fan. In the beginning of the season, we play teams that are not so well known, okay? But they will sign up to play Kentucky because they get a lot of exposure and recognition by playing a big name team, right? And we do have the most winning history in college basketball, just so all y'all know. Okay, so these teams come in and they play Kentucky. And it's always fun to watch the Cats play, but okay, when we start winning by 10, 20, 30 plus points, okay, it gets a little boring. Okay, I'll admit it. I'm not so focused on the game. I'll get up, I'll go get something to drink, or I'm searching the pantry for some chocolate, whatever, playing on Facebook, something, because it doesn't really have my attention. Now, granted, it does feel good when we win. It always feels good when we win. Oh, but those tournament games, when we're playing another team, like, I don't know, maybe the team that is my boss's favorite team, and he's been talking smack all week about how they're going to smash us. I don't do that because I don't like to eat crow, but apparently he didn't mind. But he'd been talking it up all week, and this happened last season during March Madness. They call it madness for a reason. Okay, so it was intense. From the tip-off, it was back and forth, and we would score, but then they would answer, or we'd get a three-pointer, and then they would answer it with a three-pointer, and then we'd foul, but it was crazy. And I go a little ballistic, I'm not going to lie. Jake leaves the house when it gets like this. My dog is hiding. I'm not kidding, but I can't help myself. I get so excited. But I about give myself a heart attack when it happens. But that is my focus. And listen, when we win, it is the best feeling on the planet. I love it. I love it. Listen, when it gets that close, that's when you really start paying attention. Okay, what's my point? God will let the enemy get really close to us sometimes, but he always gets the last shot. And it is a winning shot every single time. So what I wanted to say to you ladies tonight, this is a big group of girls, so I know there are some of you all in here that are dealing with some stuff. And you feel like you are going back and forth with the enemy, back and forth, and he's getting some pretty good shots on you. Don't quit. Whatever you do, do not quit. Are y'all listening to me tonight? Don't you quit. You keep praying and you keep going because God is building this up. It is a divine setup, and he will make that last shot. And it will be good. And he will gain so much glory from it. Don't quit. Don't quit. Continuing on, verse 5. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We've let the Israelites go and have lost their services." I thought I had a short-term memory problem. Wow, how quickly they have forgotten what God had done. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with all the other chariots of Egypt, with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites, who were marching out boldly. They were marching out boldly. That makes me laugh every time I read it. Y'all know why they were marching out boldly? They hadn't seen the enemy yet. They hadn't even seen the enemy yet. They were feeling really good about themselves by this point, right? I mean, everything that they had just seen in Egypt, all of the plagues and God's mighty hand that they had seen firsthand. And now they were marching out. We're on our way to the promised land. Look at us go. We're awesome, right? Okay, every time we start, or maybe it's just me, but every time, and we have plenty of opportunity, believe me, in this study, to see how the Israelites are reacting and their arrogance or their what are you thinking moments. I am really quick to want to judge them. Every time I do, I have to look at myself. And God shows me, Paula, you've done the exact same thing. When I don't know that the enemy is on my tail, it's really easy for me to be like, yeah, I got this. Look at me, I'm doing pretty good. I'm a daughter of the King. He wants to bless me. Have y'all done that? Or you know somebody that has, y'all just won't admit it. I'll admit it. I'll admit it. Yeah, it's really easy to march out boldly when we don't see the enemy coming. He's coming. He's coming. The Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. Verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified. What in the world? They were marching out boldly just a minute ago. Now they're terrified? Well, how does that happen? The answer is in the phrase, looked up. Actually, you know what? I left something out that I want you all to hear. The phrase boldly, the Israelites are marching out boldly. I want you all to hear the definition of this before I go on. Boldly, the expression means defiantly or with confidence. This is what got me. The phrase is usually used for arrogant sin and pride. Ouch. Ouch. Okay, looked up. Let me read the first definition of looked up. This is why they were terrified. They lifted up their eyes. It's an expression that indicates an intentional and careful looking. Okay, picture it. In order for them to have to look up at the enemy, what did they have to turn away from? Do you remember what was right in front of them? Yes, the pillar of cloud or the pillar of fire was right in front of them. But when the enemy came around behind them, they looked up at the enemy. No wonder they were terrified. They took their eyes off of where it needed to be. Okay, here's the part I want you to hear. They looked up and fixed their sights on the distance. They fixed their sights on the distance. Okay, y'all stick with me. I know I'm reading a lot of definitions tonight, but I want you all to get this. Okay, here's the definitions for fixed. Securely placed or fastened firmly, set in the mind. To fix one's eyes upon or direct one's attention to. to turn the eyes away from other things and fix on something. Isn't that creepy? They had turned their eyes away from God and they had fixed it on the enemy. Naturally, they were filled with fear. We do the same thing. Listen to what happens when we take our eyes off of where they need to be. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. Okay, I have a period in my Bible right there, but actually in the original Hebrew, there is no period. It's a continuous thought. So it should read like this. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord, and they said to Moses. Okay, what we're getting ready to hear are the Israelites talking out of both sides of their mouth. It looks like they cried out to the Lord, but actually they were complaining to Moses. Have y'all ever done that? Oh, Lord, please help me in this situation. I cannot believe that you brought me here. That's what was going on. Listen to what they were saying. Verse 11, they said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Can y'all believe what you're even hearing? Do we do this? What happens when we take our eyes off of Jesus? There are two verses that I found in Hebrews, if you want to jot them down. Hebrews 3:1 and Hebrews 12:2. Hebrews 3:1 says, fix your thoughts on who? On Jesus. 12:2 says, fix our eyes on Jesus. Our thoughts and our eyes need to constantly be fixed on Jesus. Because the second we take our eyes off of Jesus and we look at our situation, or we see what the enemy's throwing at us, look at what it does to us. Look at the things that start coming out of our mouth. I can't believe you brought me here, Lord. What are you doing with me here? I was better off before. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be here. We begin to question God's actions and His motives. Blows me away. The Israelites, I want you all to hear this because we do this. The Israelites started to have more faith in the enemy's ability to destroy them than they had faith in God's ability to rescue them. We do that. When we fix our eyes on something else besides Jesus, we start to think that the enemy's got us. You know why? He starts to rule us by fear. That's why. He can convince us of all kinds of crazy things when we're not looking at Jesus. Let's keep going. Before we go on, we need to understand what the Israelites were facing. They had come right to the Red Sea. The enemy was behind them. They had nowhere to go. Their situation was completely hopeless, and they were completely helpless. Is that speaking to anybody tonight? I know it is, because like I said, we got a lot of women in here. We deal with this stuff. I've got a situation in my life right now. Unless God Himself moves, it is completely hopeless, and I am completely helpless. There's nothing I can do. Nothing. This was the situation that the Israelites were in. Verse 13, Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Oh, if I could flip a switch and we would get this once and for all and leave out of this room knowing for the rest of our lives that God will fight for us. All we need to do is be still. Look. If only that would work. Girls, what will it take for us to get this? It's so true. Remember last week, I think I said it at least 100 times. Our God does not change. He is the same God that He was then today. He doesn't change. He will fight for you. We have absolutely no reason to fear. If there is fear in your life today, I challenge you to look really close, because I promise you, somewhere along the way, you've taken your eyes off of Jesus and you've put it on your situation. I promise. That's what happens. Because if we're looking at Christ, we got nothing to fear. Nothing. Verse 15, the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the water so the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh and his chariots and his horsemen." God's doing something. He's doing something then. He's doing something with you all. He's doing it, whether you can see it or not. Verse 19, then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to one side and light to the other side, so neither went near the other all night long. God will provide protection for you in the desert. He will. Isn't that cool? Verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with the wall of water on their right and on their left. Now we need a Pam moment. Did you hear what God just did? He split the sea and they walked through on dry land. What are you all facing tonight that is any harder than a sea? Any of you? You got something bigger than that? You got something bigger than that? Okay, we did have something bigger than that. Check it out. Before we became Christians, we were lost in our sin and we were hopeless and we were helpless. Jesus made a way for us to get to the Father. He gave us forgiveness. That makes the Red Sea look like a pond. God has done the impossible in our lives already. What else we got? I think He's got it. There is nothing, I've probably said this 100 times, I'll say it 100 more times, and y'all do like this if you hear me this time. There is nothing in your life that you all are facing tonight that God cannot handle, that He's not allowing for a purpose for Him to gain glory. That's good news. We're not fighting anything that will not bring Him glory. Don't quit, don't quit, don't quit. 23, the Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back into its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. This part gets overlooked a lot, I think. We focus so much on God splitting the sea and the Israelites walking through on dry ground that we forget that He destroyed the enemy. He completely wiped him out. He did the same thing at the cross. I believe it's in Colossians 3. I think I wrote it down. Y'all can look it up later. That when Jesus died on the cross, He made a public spectacle of the enemy. We don't know what that looked like. That happened in the spiritual realm. But the enemy knows, he knows that he is defeated. He has no authority over you as a believer in Christ. He can do nothing to you. God's got him on a leash. The most he can do is to distract you and get you to look away from Christ and to look at your situation. If he can get you to do that, he will control you and rule you with fear. Where are you looking tonight? What you got going on, ladies, in your life that's causing fear or anxiety? Where are you looking? I promise you, it's nothing that God can't handle. He's brought us here for a reason. I know there are so many of us in this room that are right smack in the middle of a desert right now. It's a divine setup, ladies. He's got something planned. He's doing it for a reason. Let's cooperate with him. There are so many stories I could tell. A couple of years ago, God brought me to a situation. It was definitely hopeless. There was nothing I could do, and I was definitely helpless. And the more I prayed about it, I kept feeling like God was saying, Paula, just believe me for this. Just believe me for this. It made absolutely no sense whatsoever. But I did. I took God up on it, and I started believing him for it. And y'all, he did nothing less miraculous than split the waters. I watched God do the impossible. That would have never happened if I had not put my eyes on Jesus. If I had kept my eyes on the situation, it was impossible. Y'all know what impossible means, right? You're like, okay, it wasn't going to happen. It was impossible. God did it anyway. You know what I think I've learned about God? He loves stuff like that because then he gets the glory for it. I don't. I did nothing. I was completely helpless. When I mean I'm helpless, I'm helpless. I have another situation that I mentioned earlier. I'm still in it. There's nothing I can do. I've bawled my eyes out at the feet of Jesus so many times. Lord, you know. I can't do anything here. Y'all know what it feels like. I keep having to remind myself, okay, when you get frustrated, when you want to throw your arms up and quit, that's when I need to say, who am I looking at? Am I looking at my situation, Lord? Am I going to look at you? You're big enough to handle this. I want to believe you for this. I encourage you all to share with others tonight at your table. Wow, y'all move chairs. There's a bunch of y'all at these tables around here. Y'all are sneaky. Encourage each other to share, because I tell you what, when you've got a sister in Christ, a girlfriend that can pull alongside of you and encourage you to continue to pray, not ever give up. You keep looking at Jesus. Look at Jesus. Look at Jesus. Don't look at your situation. And we can encourage one another, and we can pray for another, and we can watch God do amazing things. And I tell you what, when he does, then you got somebody to celebrate it with. God gets all the glory for it. Ladies, he is worth it. He's not just, he is worthy. We forget who we're praying to sometimes, don't we? I mean, like, okay, have y'all ever just gone outside? I know I'm a little weird, but just go outside and look up at the stars and remember that your God spoke it into existence. We serve a big God. I want to keep my focus on him, not on my impossible situation. It's impossible for me. It is not impossible for God. What did Jesus tell the father that had the demon-possessed son? I believe it's in Mark. Everything is possible for him who believes. Everything. I am not giving up on this issue in my life. I'm not. Y'all ask me about it by the end of the 10 weeks. Maybe. I love you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for taking this journey with me. When I was doing this back in January and February, I never, to be honest, expected really anybody to care. It was just me and God in the cold and in the desert, and he took me on some pretty amazing rides, let me tell you. So y'all are along for the ride with me, and that's pretty cool. You all are prayed over constantly, and I expect God to do amazing things among you all this semester, and I want to hear stories. Let me pray over you all, and you all can discuss. Lord, thank you. Thank you for the reminder that you are holy, that you are almighty. God, nothing is too hard for you. God, I pray that you will quicken our minds and our spirits, that we will remember who you are and what you have done in the past. And Lord, it helps us just to remember what you did for us on the cross. Lord, I pray that you will stun us again. God, we worship you tonight. Draw us to you, Lord. I pray that you will infuse this group with hope that can only come from you. Lord, that you will open our eyes to the divine setup that you've got going on in our lives right now, Lord, that it is for a purpose. It's so you're going to be glorified. Oh, God, I do pray that you will glorify yourself among us. Be lifted high even tonight. Lord, I love you. We love you, and we want to see you move. God, we truly want to encounter you. We worship you in this moment. Praise you, Jesus, for what you're going to do. It's in your almighty, precious name that I pray. Amen.